Heyo, Duckies and Dice Fiends, welcome on in. It is the Chaotic Wholesome Presents Table Talk Show. I am Kay, one of your co-hosts, and I am here with David. David, who the heck is you and what the heck is we doing here?
I am ready to slander and fight Charlie Kirk on Maine for reasons unrelated to TTRPGs. Hi, welcome. This is the Chaotic Wholesome Presents Tuesday table show of talking, where every week we talk about TTRPG stuff, how to be a better player, how to be a better GM, how to be a better person, all with a focus on intersectionality and inclusivity so that everybody can have a good time.
And as always, find us here on Tuesdays doing this, Thursdays and Fridays, find us here at the same bat time, same bat channel, doing our Baldur's Gate 3 first playthrough. And that's all we really have on deck right now. Don't forget, y'all, the Crit Awards just opened up, so go nominate your favorite performer systems and APs. It means a lot to people. And we are here today with a very special guest, not just Gilmore, who is being a terror. We have Steve Saylor, who is an incredible disability advocate in both the gaming space and the TTRPG space. And we are so excited to have him here. Tell us, Steven, what are you up to? What do you do? And what you going to tell us about today?
Hi, welcome everyone. Thanks so much for having me. First of all, this is an honor. I'm so honored to be here. Yeah, I'm Steve Saylor. I am an accessibility advocate and consultant in the video game industry. I'm saying this not to brag, but you might have seen potentially my work in the Last of Us series or Assassin's Creed Valhalla or just recently in Forza Motorsport. But I'm also consulting on the Call of Duty franchise for accessibility.
Excuse me.
Yeah, sorry. What question?
Look, just okay. I should have shut up and let you finish.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
Okay, for the people watching at home who don't know, accessibility isn't just for like people who are disabled.
Correct.
Accessibility is for everybody. Everyone I know has ADHD except for Kay. Like literally everyone.
And that's just the jury is just out on that. I just can't get a diagnosis. Oh
Right.
my goodness. Herb, thank you so much for the raid. Welcome on in, everyone.
Hey, I know him.
Yeah.
Hey, Herb, thank you, Raiders. I was and am mid-rant. We're talking about, well, okay, this is good because I can let you start again.
Yes, okay.
And
sure.
instead of interrupting you, I can let you finish.
Oh, do you want me to continue? I continue. Yeah. Okay. All right. Yeah. Hi, Steve, accessibility consultant. Worked on a few things. Last of Us, Assassin's Creed, Call of Duty. Currently working on it right now. But also, I am now jumping into the TTRPG space with a brand new show called Dungeons and Disableds, which is basically a show where a bunch of nerdy disabled players sit around a virtual table and play Dungeons and Dragons with me as the dungeon master. And we're premiering literally I mean, I don't know when this podcast goes up, but literally tomorrow, April 3rd at 7 p.m. Eastern, and our very first episode.
And Jazzy Henyo, thank you so much for the raid. We've got a double raid all the way. Hello everyone, I am Kay. This is David. We are here with the Table Talk Show where we talk all things TTRPG from indies to intersectionality. We are here with special guest Steve Saylor. We are going to get through introductions. I promise. We just keep getting raids from incredible and awesome people. And yes, so Steve was just telling us, like, I also work in video games, so I am very familiar with Steve's work and have definitely taken some of the tips and articles that he's taken, brought it into my industry. So also a fan of your TTRPG work. So hearing that you were doing a podcast was so exciting. My sticker is in the other room. I got to connect with Steve about this at PAX East. I was like, hi, you don't know me, but I know you. and you do cool
No, I
stuff.
remember you from Gig, like
That's
all the
true.
Gig,
That's
the
true.
Zoom calls. So yeah, no, you were. I definitely knew you and your work too. So this is great.
So it was just this perfect moment of, oh my goodness, you want to come talk about this? Because this is literally what we do is we just talk about it. So we are so excited that you're all here, Raiders. If you're not following Steve, please go do. So this is, from our conversations before, a series of one-shots, correct?
Yes, yeah. So I decided there was a few things I kind of had to figure out how to be able to try to make this as accessible and also as approachable as possible. And one of the things that, as a fan of like TTRPG actual play shows, one of the things that I always struggle with is the length of episodes, and also how to be able to jump into a long form campaign. So I decided that, and also, for my players, I did not want to have them commit to a, multi-month or year-long campaign because, hey, disabilities kind of get in the way, and you can't always predict a schedule on a regular basis. So I decided to do it sort of like in a Dimension 20 sort of style, where I would create basically a series of like one-shot adventures that have like about 4 or 5 episodes, an hour long each, and release those, and then I would basically have a new set of cast and a new story, a new adventure, shortly thereafter. So yeah, I figured it was probably the easiest way for people to jump in at any given point. So if one adventure doesn't hit for you, hopefully maybe the next one will.
I think that's really smart because that's a challenge that David and I have spent a lot of time. We've got our own solution to this, maybe eventually someday if we ever are able to get our stuff together.
Look,
But
time
that
is a
is part
flat
of
circle.
it really is.
It's,
And
it's timey-wimey, wibbly-wobbly stuff.
Precisely.
Yeah.
I think we're on year 3 of going, we'll have this out this summer.
Mm-hmm.
But again, asking, like, Erg was kind enough to donate, without really knowing me, to donate his time to play in a 10-part. I think that was the one we chopped down to 8, an 8-part
Yeah.
5e game. And even then, it's so challenging to make space, to make sure that everyone's schedules align. Like, scheduling is the first boss of TTRPGs.
Yes, for
Yep.
sure.
Like, I swear, scheduling has killed more campaigns than a BBEG.
That's why I figured it's like, okay, it's okay to take a break once the adventure. Like, the good thing is the first adventure is done, it's recorded. I just have to basically just sort of sit down and edit and premiere it. But like once the adventure's done, I still have time to be able to put together a new cast and new recordings. So, and I'm okay with taking a break in between. Like, it's just it's more of like event viewing. Essentially, is kind of how I'm doing with the show, instead of just like having to try to keep up. Like, oh no, I'm gonna miss an episode this week. Like, it's just make it easy for myself.
Absolutely. And so these are all pre-recorded, you said,
Yep.
and edited. We deal with a lot of people who are interested in either being in APs or running their own. Like, what is we talked a little bit about it. We addressed this a tiny bit, but like what went into the decision of, are we going to do it live or are we going to record and edit? Like, how did you come to that decision?
Yeah, it was pretty much how I had said it. Like, the reason why I decided not to do live was because, hey, disabilities get in the way, and you never know, depending on depending on the disability, whether you're going to have a good day or a bad day, and the things like you have planned, like basically you just have to kind of go with the flow. So I figured it was probably easier just to be able to have them as pre-recorded, so that way if we need to take breaks in between, like that's why I also decided to to kind of break them up into hour episodes, so that we can be able to take a break after each hour if anyone needed it. And it actually, in a way, I even learned a little bit more about how to produce actual plays, because initially I had it where we were going to sit down to record for like 4 or 5 hours, and I have the entire adventure pretty much done, and I could basically just start editing right away after the first recording. But there was a few players that were like, hey, you know what, brain fog, everything, can't really function at the moment, we need to finish it for the day. And then I was like, okay, you know what, maybe I should break them up into 2 separate recordings instead of just the one. And also part of it too was for accessibility purposes. I don't like necessarily the auto captions for a lot of different things. Even Google's own API, which is probably the best sort of captioning that's out there. It's not the greatest, and so I wanted to make sure that I had the best like captions as possible. So pre-recording it just made it a lot easier to be like, okay, I can actually get proper captions done, and then that way, as soon as you watch it, you can basically like it will be as accessible as possible. It also allowed me to be able to do like full transcripts, so you know you don't have to necessarily listen to the show or watch the show. Basically, you can just download the PDF and kind of just read along if you wanted to do that too. So that was kind of the main deciding factor of going with live versus pre-recorded.
Kay has a deep understanding of the trouble captions can present, even with the goodness of the Google API, because there was a episode of Body and Soul that needed one particular name of the god updated.
Oh,
because
yes.
it was because the god is Anansi, famous trickster spider god. But instead Google was like, oh, you're referring to that political party from like 1939 in Germany. And they're like, no, no, we are not.
It was an incredible all black cast, and it was like I go up and I hug.
Oh my god.
I'm like,
that would be the worst.
I'm just watching it because David ran production. Like I didn't even want to be in the room because I'm like, let's give people their space. And I'm like,
and when I tell you Kay was in the trenches going over that, and like, you know, character name gonna come up all the time. So yeah, and sort of referencing what I was alluding to earlier is I know a bunch of people with ADHD, and a couple of my friends have been like, I think tabletop is cool. Watching tabletop is tough because there is no show on Netflix or Hulu or on Amazon or any of the other services that they might use where captions are not on. Yeah. And even I've been converted to because like I was in the dark ages of like, why do you need captions to watch this? And then all of the bad audio rolled out for streaming services, and I was like, okay, I get it now. And after that conversion, I was like, oh, like this. There are a lot of reasons why it makes it more convenient, especially for people with ADHD. And so actual plays often don't have good captions. And the other thing is that I have friends who you could get them to sit in a game for more than 3 hours. You can't get them to sit down and watch a game for more than an hour. Like an hour is when they top out. And so, like Kay said, we've like talked about and really tried to address yes, for like charity games, we're gonna do the like 3 hour block. And for a lot of other things, we're doing the 3 hour block, but we also have to produce content that isn't this to open up to more viewers and to more players.
Yeah.
And also, again, we know a lot of incredible players and storytellers who are ADHD or, you know, various other, and they're like, I have to stim. And they, you know, feel embarrassed about doing whatever, which normalize stimming on camera. It's totally cool and fair. Normalize it so people can stim in meetings and do what they need to do to be able to focus. But also you don't always want to put yourself out there like that. So at our goodie bags for conventions contain the little popper stim toys. And the amount of joy that people have got, like the look of like, this will get me through the panel I have to do.
Oh, I saw that in the bag. I just immediately took it out, and basically it's been in my my jacket pocket for like the entire run of PAX. Like it was just, I don't have ADHD, or at least, you know, haven't been diagnosed as such, but I do understand the pleasure of stimming. So I'm just like, hey, I love the like little fidget spinners or little fidget kind of gadgets. I'm always constantly have like things on my desk that I'm just constantly always fidgeting with. So I understand that 100%.
Yeah. And so many performers I know who are like, can you tell me when we're on break, or can you tell me when I'm not on camera? when the focus on someone else so that I can stand up and move around or, do what I need to do. This is exactly why I do not use talking heads on my streams. Yeah, that would do it.
Yeah. And that's the thing too. It's like, it's especially when you're trying to be able to create an actual play. And I get like, especially with captions, trying to be able to make it as like that as accessible as possible. Like even, so one of the players who I had is also deaf. So I had to have like try to figure out a way to be able to do that. So we had to use Google Meets, and she had to kind of use a combination of Google Meets with its captions, plus also Chrome's own built-in captioning. And it was, it's that like having to actively focus on that is a lot of mental like just a lot of mental strength that you have to basically kind of pull through. And then also, so yeah, like having auto captions is fine, but then again, like when you have, like, I understand, like, okay, if you want proper captions, well, then you have to edit it, and also like you have to make sure that it's correct, or you have like, but no one has a lot of time to go skim through 4 hours of content to try to edit all the captions, and no one has really time for that. I think probably the only ones that actually do it well is Critical Role, but that's also kind of one of the reasons why they don't do live streams as much anymore. It's because they have a full captioning team to be able to do that and be able to properly be able to like have those captions available at like when it goes live. So it's hard. It is one of the hardest things to do for any stream, for any show. I've gone through so many different like services and different sort of tools and plugins to try to be able to get the best captions as I can, and unfortunately it's just, there's times you just have to put in the work, and it's hard to be able to do it properly. So yeah,
for anyone watching, this is the solution that we have come to, and David will tell you it is not easy. It still requires a lot of manual work, but I ended up paying for the full suite of DaVinci Resolve, which has the option to make auto captions off of timeline.
Yep.
And if you have the different tracks, it won't say the name of it, but it'll do the little dash to show you when there's a new person speaking. So you let that go through and do everything, and then you have to go back and change Anansi back to Anansi.
Right.
But that also, because you get the little break and it's timed out, you can do you want 2 lines? How many characters per line? Like you can adjust a little bit and make it work. Again, it still takes me a lot of time to go through those and clean it up, but my first like industry job was I was a logger for a company called AMS Productions, and I wrote captions for Race Car Driver, which was a Formula One, a reality show. So I was trying to log what people were saying on a racetrack.
Wow, that's a challenge in of itself.
Were lost. So I'm like, I can do captions pretty quickly. This is better.
Yes. Yeah. I use Premiere for some of that because they have a similar thing where you can go through and auto transcribe for that. We talked about a little bit of this off air. I've actually been using a service called Riverside because not only allows me to be able to like send a link for my players to join, and it records their video and audio locally, and then it's uploading while we're recording and playing. So that way, by the end of the recording, pretty much a majority of their video is all the way uploaded. So that way I've got high quality video and high quality audio that's separated into their own video and audio files, which is great. But what's also great too is that I can go in, and once I'm like, I want to edit, it has sort of like a Descript kind of style, document kind of style editing for transcription. So basically I can go in and just I can edit it like a Word document, and if I want to delete something, I can just highlight it, select it, hit delete, and it will delete it from the actual video itself. And it will also, like, okay, if I have to correct a name or a place, because obviously Dungeons and Dragons has a lot of names, and obviously you fell into that as like with Anansi as well. So
you've got names with 6 apostrophes, and
Yep. So what's great too is that if it's sort of if it found like similar versions of that word, and you say, okay, I'll correct it to this, you can even do like correct everywhere, and it will actually go through and like it replace all of the semi versions of it. It doesn't catch everything because there are like especially I have a character that's named Yasir, which is spelled Yahzzir, and that's that can also come up as
they're like 12 different spellings of that sprung into my head. And I was
Exactly.
like,
So,
whoa.
and I saw all of them in the transcript. So some of them are able to catch, some of them are not, but it's pretty easy. And that's also kind of also one of the reasons why I decided to make the episodes about an hour, because it, makes it a lot easier and it takes less time to edit the transcript. So it just works out great. And then you can export the transcription as either a text document, or you can export it out as a subtitle file, so you can import that directly into YouTube or your video editing program of choice. And yeah, it just makes it so much easier. It's not, again, it's the hardest part is the time it takes to be able to do it properly, but it's the thing that's like the most efficient solution that I have currently right now.
So, and I'll say this too really quick. I have an interesting relationships with APs, because I love the feeling of like we finished a 3 to 4 hour session, like we got far, because you always kind of start off, it's a little bit, everyone's kind of got to get back into character, and some people are faster about that than others,
Sure.
like, and it can take, and so it always felt strange to me, and strange isn't the right word for it, but it always felt interesting to me, these shorter, like, you're only playing for an hour. Hey, Sir Heckalot, welcome in. Like, you're only playing for an hour. Like, after an hour, you're just getting into the good stuff. And that's part of why, like, it's started to appeal to me of, like, set a timer. Like, figure out what's going to be about an hour worth of episode and record 2 to 3 in one setting. I know 12-Sided Stories, which Candace the Magnificent is in several of them. That's how they do it. They record like 2 sessions at a time. So yeah, maybe you're just getting back into it in the first one. And that's the same way Dimension 20 does it. Dimension 20 records almost back to back to back. Like they'll do 3 episodes, 4 episodes in a day. All of those miniseries are done, like the shorter ones are done over a weekend.
Yeah, they do them over the course of like a couple of days, but they're multiple
recording
hour
at 3
sessions.
a.m.
Yeah.
Zoinks.
It's
I mean,
really
that's when
funny.
I'm very active, but
It's really funny, David. You won't know at which point they're recording, but it's at some point, like someone will just look into the camera. They're like, "We're in a warehouse in West Hollywood. It's 3 a.m. Send help."
Yeah, and it's funny too, because like I have a bit of experience in producing like shows. Like I worked in radio, but before I got into the video game side, so I understand kind of like the production side of things when it comes to making stuff, and even the production side of TTRPG play. Because I used to actually have a podcast way back in the day, like 2012, where it was a show that's honestly actually still running to this day. It's called Terrible Warriors, and it was literally like it's similar to how I've been producing this show. It's like we instead of doing a long form campaign, it was one adventure a month, and we break them up into 4 episodes, and it's we tried a whole bunch of different TTRPG settings. I think we probably only played like actual D&D like once or twice throughout the whole run of when I was in there, but it was so much easier to be able to, because you only have to, as a players and as a DM or as a GM, you basically only have to commit to 1 recording, and you might have to split it up into multiple if you have to, but it was always 1 recording, and we always had to record in person. This was before we were able to do this all online.
Yeah.
And we would sit for like 4 or 5 hours, and we were able to, like, pretty much as players and as the GMs were able to figure out that cadence of like, okay, we're coming up on about an hour, we're starting to kind of figure out how, okay, let's end it here on a cliffhanger, and so I've taken that experience and brought that into the show as well. But yeah, with actual plays, it's just, I understand the want to to be able to mimic other shows and have like 3, 4, 5 hours of an episode, but I'm finding it's harder for me to be able to watch even a movie for that long. So I don't even know how I was able to get through like 3 campaigns so far of just Critical Role alone. So it's a lot. It's hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of hours. So I'm hoping that this is kind of like a good, like, at least with my show, it's like a good sort of like medium. Be like, okay, you don't have to make a huge commitment to be able to watch or listen to the show.
I can tell you how I got through the first 2 seasons of Critical Role. The pandemic.
Right.
That too. Yeah, that helped.
Had nothing else to do.
The
saved
panini.
me.
Yeah.
Yeah, that works.
And it's like and like for people who are doing production on things and people who are aspiring to do production on things, having recently like done a thing where the organizer was like, it'll be an hour and a half, and I looked in the mirror and then I looked at Kay and then I looked in the mirror again and I was like, it's not going to be an hour and a half. And then 6 hours later, we're in there. And to be clear, I had a great time. I had no like everybody was on board and knew what the thing was.
Sure.
But not every player and not every participant can do that. And so being able to do hey, listen, when I say we're going to be here an hour and a half, I mean 15 minutes of green room, 15 minutes of like hanging around after, and 60 minutes to do, and that presents challenges. Like Kay and I, one of the things that Kay is really incredible at is landing the plane on time.
Mm-hmm.
Like when we do our charity games and you've got 6 people at a table, and we finish the game and it's at 3 hours and 5 minutes. Like that's insane. Like it's nuts, because like we've all sat down and watched a charity game that was supposed to be an hour and a half, 2 hours, or 3 hours.
Mm-hmm.
And then, 3 hours and 45 minutes later, they're just getting to the big bad or getting to like whatever the big third act is. And so keeping things concise is really a challenge. But it's an important skill to master, not just for the sake of your viewers, but also for the sake of your players.
Yep, for sure. Like I had actually funny enough, so it hasn't aired yet, or I haven't really talked about it. Well, I sort of teased a little bit on our Twitter account, but I was able to do a quick one shot of a play test of actually a 1-page RPG that I made. And I had planned to record for 2 hours. I had like a block of roughly about 2.5 to kind of, figured, okay, half an hour to be able to do tech setup, and then an hour and a half to play. And then if we're going over, we had that extra half hour of just in case if we're in a groove and we're trying to be able to land it and finish it off, and if it goes over, it goes over. But as things happened, tech stuff happened, and it was basically that 2 hours or 2.5 hours basically went down to 2, then it went down an hour and a half. And then by the time we were able to record, I literally had exactly only 1 hour before I had a player that was like a hard out because they had to get to another panel. And it taught me as a DM to basically be like, okay, I have literally 60 minutes to be able to do something with this. Let's figure out at least a story that it's short. It's going to be super short, but let's do something. And it worked out, and I was able to pretty much get it almost right on time. But it helped me actually figure out this, because I had the second half of the recording of the adventure for this adventure that I'm premiering tomorrow, basically literally a week later, and it helped me to sort of, okay, I know I need to be able to get to this point by the end of the story, and I have this time. So it actually allowed me to cut certain things and skip certain things and speed things up a little bit to be able to make it work. And I think actually probably the last 2 episodes of the show are probably my favorite, because it had everything that you would want in a show. It had RP, it had combat, but it also was concise. And there was story in there that was really great. Not to say that the first 3 episodes are garbage, because but I also had players that were brand new to D&D as well, so it was kind of that I have to take it a little bit slow. So but there's a lot of a lot of story that's still in there as well. So, but I think probably the last 2 episodes are probably my favorite as a DM and as a producer of the show, because it was like, we got this, we nailed this pretty much within the last 2 episodes.
It's really cool when you can find that group, because that is a thing I really have a feel for, of things are feeling slow, we need to speed it up. Or they don't have info, how can we get them info? Because you have plans, and then you get some of the best RP you've ever seen. And you're like, well, I'm not going to put in this silly little puzzle over this RP. The puzzle is leaving. How do I get them from point A to point B in a way that's satisfying?
Yep. Yeah, I had a whole like two major kind of plot points that I was wanting to be able to do in the show, and I was just like, like, or at least those there might be like, but people will probably listen to it or watch it and be like, did you really kind of get through this that quickly? I'm like, hey, I had 5 hours. Give me a break. Like I couldn't do everything that was plausible in this situation. But you're right. It's like, hey, when the story's like, I have to go with the players like flow, and just I have to let them figure out things as they go. And you know what? Because I had a mix of seasoned players and brand new ones, it was it took a little bit for the kind of the engine to keep going. But yeah, you're right. It's like sometimes you just have to cut it. But what I like to do is I like to take stuff and be like, oh, I can use this potentially later in another adventure.
Exactly.
So that's what I like. I just take all that stuff and reuse it later.
And
I was going to say, we have enough stuff from cut content from just our Christmas charity games to make a new charity game.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that. That's great.
Yeah. And as a GM tip for anyone listening, we always build an eject button or a quick win scenario into our boss fights, because inevitably you're going to get to that big bad. You're going to have 15 minutes. That's not even a round of combat with 6 people at the table, right? So you want to find a way that if you want to put something there that's obvious enough that players are going to be like, oh, I should go poke at that, and then have it be a big, cool thing so that it's a satisfying boss fight, because you never, with a one-shot, have time to finish fighting the big bad.
Yeah, I think at the last the second, I can't remember if it's the second to last episode, I think it's the last episode. I think, yeah, I can't remember which one of the two was basically just the entire episode was a boss fight. And I mean, it's up to the viewers and the players whether or not it was a good, satisfying boss fight. I mean, but it was fun. It was fun to run. But yeah, you're right. It's like that. You never know, especially with it's like, yeah, you got 5 players at the table. Plus, you also have the enemies, however many they have, whether it's one big boss or a boss and a bunch of little mini kind of whatevers. And so it's hard, but yeah, like I like that idea of like sort of like a quick eject button. I need to figure out how to be able to incorporate that in there, because otherwise I'm like, I feel like, oh man, this combat's going so long. How do I freaking end this without fudging the numbers?
And it's great because you build in this thing that's like a gimmicky way to end the fight. And not only do you get out of there fast, but also the person who figures it out is like, look at how clever we were to do this thing. And that's great.
And especially if you figure it out early, you can foreshadow it earlier in the adventure.
Right.
Yeah, that good call. Yeah, there was a few things I was able to like do that it was something that like the players had come up with that I had like. So the way I had structured the actual one shot was, I figured keep it easy. It's in one location. All I need to know about the location is how everything is run. Like I'll even spoil it a tiny bit. The adventure is called Escape from Revel's End, and if you have played Frost Maiden on D&D, or you played the adventure Prisoner 13, it's literally that. It's a prison break, and Revel's End is the prison.
Look, I love prison breaks.
Oh yeah.
I always wanted to do that as a D&D campaign or like a story. So I was like, I needed to find, okay, is there an actual prison in D&D? And it just, of course there is. Like it just like Revel's End. So I'm like, perfect. So all I needed to do was like, I had I actually read a little bit of I don't know if you guys know the book, The Lazy Dungeon Master's Guide. So I read that. I remember one thing that sort of stood out was like, have a strong beginning and then just have bits and pieces that you can, like, players can sort of fill in, and that helps you sort of fill out the rest of the story. So I had a really strong beginning, and then I just had the world around them of the prison, and I was like, hey, go nuts, figure it out what to do. But there were times that the players were suggesting things and doing things that I was able to be like, oh, this is where I can drop this bit of lore. This is where I can do this story or drop this NPC. Like, it was so great just figuring out the puzzle in my head, like live through improv. It was so great. That's how satisfying sometimes it can be a DM. I love it.
There is an episode of a thing that I was in that will never see the light of day for reasons.
Okay.
But
good reasons.
Sad reasons.
Oh.
But it was a heist, basically. David and I run a lot of heists, which is the opposite of a prison break, but the same
Yep.
thing.
Same, yep. So you always got to have a yep. I got it.
And this was the GM was like, okay, we got to start this out, and so we're gonna start out with a heist. And I have no idea how you're gonna do it, right? I'm gonna let you go. And at one point, I'm like, we had a person who had just a massive disguise self bonus, and we're like, who's someone who comes to this kind of event? Who is a celebrity that we can get this person to go? And the GM's like, I don't, and comes up with this supermodel.
Nice.
And so we're walking around with this supermodel into this team member disguised as supermodel. And it was like gonna be the best. I'm so sad it will never see that day because it was gonna be the best just recurring gag of like, and here's so-and-so's. And it continued on into like the supermodel. Like there was a news report later of like this supermodel got tackled, was just walking the red carpet and got tackled. And it was like, that would have been so good.
I love it. I love it when like the recurring sort of like joke kind of just comes up, and it's so much fun because like as a DM you kind of get to just drop it and be like, "Yep, we're doing this recurring joke again," and it works every time.
Oh, Matt, thank you so much for the raid as well.
Hi.
Hello.
And it's funny because like I've told the story on stream before, but back when there were fewer tools to generate characters, especially in Pathfinder, I cooked up a prison break that we could play while we're making characters, because it's all like level 1 characters. Everybody has all 9 stats. There's no attack rolls, that you could just go. And like you said, you have a strong start. So I have like, this cool story of this wizard like sitting in there and is like, hey, do y'all want to break out of here? And then I just let the players go. And there's some wild magic involved, and like some wild shit happens. And every time, so 2 things always happen. One, every time I run the game, the players get dangerously close to ending the universe as we know it. And 2, they always, I've never had 2 groups come up with the same way of getting out of there. Like there's always like a scrap with the guard like towards the beginning.
Yeah.
But an hour goes by and I'm like, really? Did you really have to knock down the wall? Really? Did you have to summon Meteor to do this? Like it's always something like wild and off the wall. It's like, oh, you turned the entire town into kobolds. You really didn't need to do that, but here we are.
Yeah.
Look, that was not our fault. That was the wild magic.
Look,
for sure.
The dice
Yeah.
tell the story.
I remember one time it was this is like back when I was doing the podcast. I found this because if you know me, like one of the things that I absolutely love, and it's my favorite movie of all time, is The Matrix. And I found an OpenD6,
Good choice,
a fan-made system. It was set within The Matrix. And it was literally my first time GMing anything. I was like,
Wow.
I want to play this with the players that I have on the show, and I want to GM it for the first time and have that like be recorded. So it's available. I actually recorded 3 one-shot adventures set in the same kind of continuing storyline. But one of the things we had was that there was near the end, I like there was a player that she like there was a fight in a lobby of a business, or like a business tower kind of deal, and they were fighting a bunch of guards. And at one point there was a player that was kind of sitting on in the getaway car outside, but she wanted to jump in and try to be able to help. And so what she wanted to do was basically kind of pull up, do like kind of like side swipe with the car, and then just basically just shoot from within the car. But of course, she rolled a natural 1, and it was like,
so now there's a car in the lobby.
So I'm like, what can I do with this to be able to like? Because I was talking about this with Scott White from the RPG University yesterday, and one of the things I was like with we were talking about like critical fails in a game. I'm like, I never want as a DM or as a GM make a critical fail make the player feel like it's their fault, because they don't have control over the dice. It just happens. But let's see if we can be able to make it like a fun critical fail. So I had it where she literally like basically the car goes crashing into the lobby, like hood first, crushes a bunch of guards by accident, and bangs right into the elevator. And I had a thing where they were going to try to be able to, like, it was going to be a puzzle where they were going to try to be able to get up the elevator, but they realized that there are bombs that are attached to every single level, that if they trigger one of them, it's an entire like boom, 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 like every like bomb is going to go off. But I decided, like, what the hey, let's do it. So I made, like, I literally had to like crash into the elevator. All of a sudden, boom, 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 all of like everything exploded, and the entire like elevator doors crushed with a giant explosion in the lobby. And then they were like, that's from a critical fail. I'm like, hey, it just happens. And it's fun.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we have talked a lot about kind of GMing and accessibility. Tell us specifically, what can you tell us about this first campaign?
Sure. Yeah. So, yeah, we talked about, yeah, it's Dungeon Disabled, and it's called Escape from Revel's End. The players that we have are fantastic. The main sort of mission, or like kind of hard rule that I have with the show, is that you can jump in and play as, and I'll be DMing it, but you have to have at least a disability to join the table. It's and just, you know, because I wanted to best represent not only disabled players but also potentially disabled characters as well. And so the players we have is Siam. She's her, along with Mike the Quad. Hello, it's Colo. And my two friends, Morgan Baker, who is the accessibility lead over at EA, and Grant Stoner, who is basically an accessibility journalist and has a column over at IGN. And the five of them are basically playing disabled characters where they all like, yeah, it's, you know, because it's like literally it's in the name, Escape from Revel's End. They somehow find themselves as prisoners in Revel's End, and there's something that they have to either escape with, otherwise within 5 days they become permanent prisoners at Revel's End. And so it's basically kind of a race against time, but also they have to either decide, do they want to be able to try to get the thing out, or that they need to extract, or do they just want to escape? So yeah, that's the kind of the crux of the story.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And so I don't want to spend too much time on this, because we don't want to give fuel to bad argument,
To the wrong
bad faith argument
people.
Sure.
right?
Yep.
But there is so both they and their characters are disabled, asks Recluse Mage.
Yes, that is correct. So the second rule I have with the show, like, yeah, the first rule is like they have to be disabled. Player has to be disabled to join the table. But the second rule is that the player has the choice of, they can play a character that has a disability, or they can play a character that doesn't have a disability. And I leave it completely up to them. But I will say that for this adventure, all the players decided to play a character with a disability. And we tried to be able to come up with mechanics to work around that.
And that's one of the, again, we don't want to give space to bad faith arguments, but also
Sure.
I feel like this is a really, really great way to show that bad faith argument is in fact bad faith. Because like, I know our friend of the channel, D'Angelo, has, look, y'all, we have spent an obscene amount of time on this channel discussing Centaur accessibility.
I was not gonna bring it up. I was not gonna bring up Centaur disability. I was like, this is not the day that I'm gonna talk about this.
One of the playable races in D'Angelo's system, Emerald Templars, are centaurs, and in fact I got to play a short campaign of his, and I played a centaur, and it was like that moment of, he's like, oh well, we're in a dungeon, there's just ramps, right? It's like it doesn't like there's so many people who are like, dragons is fantasy and orcs is fantasy, but ramps are unacceptable. Ramps in a dungeon is where I draw the line. And it's like, that's where you draw the line.
Yeah. So I will say that one of the things that I wanted to do with the show, one of the goals I have with the show, is I wanted to showcase and highlight how to best represent not only players with disabilities, but also characters with disabilities. In that, it's kind of going into that, the bad faith arguments. Like, what, you're okay with a villain that has a scar across their face that they can't see out of one eye, but you're not okay with ramps? Like, so there. One of the things that I've kind of discovered while working within the show was that, honestly, people with disabilities have sort of an innate superpower, and that is adaptability. And we are very good at being able to adapt to our environment, whether it's accessible or not. And we just naturally kind of if we're coming in, we're going to hang out with friends. What do we I need to do to be able to make sure that happens? Sometimes it's subconsciously. Sometimes you have to actively think about and plan certain things in advance. But I wanted to sort of create that adaptability within Dungeons and Dragons. And there, I never want a character or even an NPC that essentially that they use, unless for story purposes it makes sense. But I never want to be able to say oh, you know what, you don't have you're missing a leg, so we're just gonna have magic create you a new one, and then you're perfectly fine. I never want to be able to have magic solve everything. But there are certain things in magic that that actually can be able to work within the rules and within the world that D&D sort of creates. So thankfully, there are some amazing resources that that I was able to find that essentially create sort of great mechanics to incorporate into D&D. Obviously, the combat wheelchair is a big part of the first adventure, written by Mark Thompson. There's also Jennifer Kritchmer has an amazing accessibility resource guide of just a document of all kinds of links to a bunch of different resources. And I even found one that was listed on there was a Tumblr post that has literally every disability you could think of and what are the D&D mechanics around it. One of my favorite ones was I have 2 players that have a chronic fatigue, and the D&D mechanics around that is, okay, at the end of every long rest, you roll a D20. If you roll a 2 or lower, you have a point of fatigue for the day, and you can't get rid of that fatigue until you have another long rest. It's simple, it works. Yeah, it's, it adds sort of a disadvantage to the player, but it's something that, hey, their body just, hey, they wake up, hey, it just does not want to work well and play with others. But so how do you kind of incorporate that into the DD without making it seem as if I have to give you a disadvantage because you have a disability? I never want to be able to do that. I want to be able to showcase that, using the rules of D&D, you can be able to adapt the mechanics around it. So yes, in my campaign or my adventure, there are no ramps, quote unquote, but using, aspects of the combat wheelchair, there's things that actually the players kind of created for themselves that make sense. And that they one of them, uses they have mage hand, as kind of use of that's their, that's how they use and interact with the world, because their hands are not, they're disabled. So they have to be in a wheelchair. They can't use their hands. So I just basically just had it. Yeah. Okay. The mechanics of mage hand doesn't, you have to constantly be casting because it doesn't last as long. But I just had it, I just tweaked it to be okay, yeah, you can have mage hand whenever you want. It's a cantrip. It's just works wherever you need it. It's all, you're gonna want to have it up all the time. Sure, yeah, 100%. It's not about breaking the rules of D&D or any TTRPG system. It's about finding ways to adapt what's already there and make it work for the player, because it makes sense for that character that, okay, if they can't use hands, but if they find the spell for mage hand, that allows them to interact with the world that is not, able, able-bodied, what was the word I'm looking for? Accessible. It's not accessible to them. So they use mage hand to make their world accessible. So it's stuff like that is there are ways to do that within these TTRPG systems that you can still have disabled characters without sort of resorting to, oh yeah, a dungeon just has ramps instead of stairs.
Well, that was going to be my next question, is because that is a little bit of the conversation of do you just hand wave it away? And it's yes, there are these disabled people in this fantasy world, but their disabilities don't actually impact anything. That's one approach to it.
Right.
And that is an excellent look. A lot of us play these for escapist reasons. I don't know what you're talking about. I don't play TTRPGs to escape anything. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't.
Mm-hmm.
And there is a power fantasy there of I am in this similar body in this fantasy world, but the world is completely open to me. And there is value in that, but there's also value in like, this is what I deal with every day.
Mhm.
And this is how I deal with it in the fantasy world as well. And it is still empowering. Hey, Roaming DM, welcome on in. And yes, Recluse Mage, if you have not seen the combat wheelchair, it is an excellent resource. Please
Yes.
check it out. It's really, really cool.
It's great. I don't utilize half of what Mark had created for the combat wheelchair. I just sort of use the basic version of it because, you know, in a one shot, you can't really kind of go into the full on mechanics of what the combat wheelchair provides. But there are definitely players that use it. And it works. And yeah, I think it's one of those. It's just there are definitely, yes, it's sort of like a fantasy sort of escapism, and it's not like we're trying to hand wash away like, okay, yeah, disabilities just don't exist in fantasy. It's like, no, they do exist. And yeah, there are aspects that, you know, are sort of considered modern today, like curb cuts on sidewalks or braille or the use of like of canes or like ocular implants. But, you know, you could still be able to kind of have that, like incorporate that into D&D or any TTRPG system, as long as, you know, it can be, you know, it can fit within the rules or the mechanics. Like I said, with the mage hand, you know, yeah, it doesn't last like a long enough time for a player to be able to use that. But hey, that's where kind of the rule of fun or the rule of cool kind of comes in as a DM, and being like, you know what, that's fine. You want to use mage hand all the time? I'll allow you to do it. It's like, you know, we can break that rule. There's nothing saying that you can't. Like yeah, it could be seen as, oh, but that just makes it OP, or that's just cheating. Not really. If, you know, if there's certain other aspects.
OP.
Exactly.
Right,
yeah.
And also, like, the
You're
number
not
of
a very
people,
good GM if Mage Hand is OP.
Yeah.
right, and like the number of people who swear by the Mercer rule, including me, including us, like, can you get two ounces of healing potion into your body as a bonus action? Absolutely. Like, and there are people who argue. So, like, whatever rule that you're going to stretch or hand wave or ignore, someone's going to be up your ass about it, no matter how
totally
sensible it is. I do want to say I'm really glad that you and like that this is like a disabled focused game, because there are lines there are lines that you have to walk.
Mhm.
And lines that I am not equipped to walk, because on the one hand you have the, oh well, you have a disability, so like we either like completely reformat the world so that you can, you know, do whatever you want to do, or we could build the world so that it's just completely hostile to you, or the other side of it, where there's like the trope of, if you have a disability, now you have a superpower.
Right.
And like, you know, there's Daredevil, there's Zatoichi, there are all these people that have because like my first thought was like my first like non-wheelchair thought was, well, if somebody's missing an arm, there's the duelist feature in D&D where it's like, if you don't have a thing in one hand and you have like your main one-hand weapon, you get a bonus. And it's like, okay, well, I'm missing an arm, I'm obviously taking this feat, I should probably have this feat by default.
Sure. And that's the thing too, is like, I also have a player that has like, is missing like, it has an amputation like from their elbow down, and it's like, yeah, I would not give them the opportunity, like the ability to handle a two-handed weapon. It just doesn't make sense. But like, it's just there are ways to be able to adapt. Like, hey, you know, as a character within that world, they would have figured out a way to be able to, you know, still be able to do the thing that they want to do. But, you know, okay, yeah, so they can't use a longsword. Whoop-de-doo.
Rapiers are better anyway. Fight me.
Right. And so like it's a difficult line to walk.
Mhm.
And like someone like me, if I wanted to run a game like this, I don't have that kind of perspective to do it, in the same way that like I couldn't set something in like mainland China and be like, oh well, I'm steeped in all the history of this is fine. And so I'm glad that y'all have this focus, so that it's a way for those of us who don't have any frame of reference can look into this and be like, oh, so this is how these things are addressed. This is how these people interact with the world. This is a perspective outside of mine. And this is also either without or leaning into whatever tropes. Like you could go, oh man, I find this trope interesting, so this is what I'm going to do, or this trope is stupid, and so I'm going to subvert it.
Mhm.
And yeah, like, you know, storytelling wise, like subverting tropes is not only like a time honored tradition, but something that marginalized communities do often,
Mhm.
because, you know, we're sick of being like stuck in these holes. Like, you know, the whole Daredevil thing. It's like, oh, you're blind? Well, I bet you know what type of bird is 300 meters away. And it's like, fuck you, dude.
No,
Just fuck
no.
you.
Yeah,
Just shut up.
exactly. Like I actually like one of the characters. Like I was in a home game for about a year or so, and one of the things, like, it was sort of my first foray into trying to be able to play a character with a disability, and I decided to play as a blind wizard. And what I decided to do to make it work was I wasn't completely sightless, but I still had some vision to kind of like walk around, but I did have a cane, or like a staff that essentially was kind of like my cane. But within combat, I actually had a familiar that was an owl, and it would basically through basically, like, as the owl would kind of fly over each sort of enemy, it gave off a sound, basically using kind of echolocation. I was like, okay, I know where each of those enemies are, and then I can sort of just stand back and just sort of send my spells. But, you know, obviously, like, the disadvantage of that is that I don't know if, you know, any of my party is anywhere going to be near that spell. That's the thing that just happens. Okay, you know what? They have to, like, they have to realize, okay, I'm sending this spell. Yeah, you're gonna get hit, and it just, like, it sucks, but it's just, that's how, like, it's the only way to be able to kind of make it as believable and best represents the character that I wanted to have with that disability. But, and I will say, like, even as a little bit of a tease for the story, is that the story that I have for this adventure is not exact, like, there are moments where it's ableist 1000%, and I was afraid to use that as sort of the first adventure, because, you know, when you think about accessibility, you want to think about, like, kind of the inspirational, like, hey,
Like
you know, it's
fluffy.
yeah, it's like, it's so brave of you just to be able to get out of bed each morning. But I wanted to sort of showcase and highlight that, yes, you know, hey, D&D, like, it's about adaptability. The characters I have are able to adapt to the world around them and utilize the things that, you know, magic spells or whatever to kind of live their day-to-day life. But there is also you know, as you know, the world is today, there is also areas of ableism. And so I wanted to I was afraid to kind of to do that, but I thought, you know what, I wanted to to showcase that, yeah, we're best representing these characters with disabilities, but I also wanted to showcase that, yeah, there are definitely ableist the things that we have to deal with. And I hope it's a story that people will be okay with, or, you know, it may cause some uncomfortability in certain aspects, but I think it's highlighting, like, it's highlighting, and then also putting a shine a light on the ableist nature of society, or even just within D&D as well.
I had someone ask me to help him build a patriarchy-free
gross. I
TTRPG
remember that.
setting. And I'm like, I don't know how to do that, and I don't know how to exist in that world, right? So say, oh, but you're making a utopia. Like, no, like,
No.
part of existence is trauma.
Sure. Yeah.
Like,
And
I mean, look at pretty much any AP. There's so much, like, RP of just trauma dumping.
Yeah.
Like, it's just a lot of that.
and that's, from a storytelling perspective, it's also really important to, like, don't do the thing where you, like, make an entire race or multiple races, like, racist.
Sure.
Like, don't just come at tieflings for no reason.
No.
No.
come at tieflings
But-
because they're jerks. Because my tieflings
Right.
are jerks, and they deserve it.
But in a careful way, you can incorporate, like, real world adversaries. And Kay and I are working on a thing and one of the things that we've spoken a lot about is like what we can't make our world too powder puff, because if there's no racism and there's no sexism and there's no ableism and there's no capitalism, then who's the villain?
That's why the first season of Star Trek Next
I was
Generation,
just about to bring that up too. Yes. No, sorry. Continue your thought. That was, but yeah. Go ahead.
Right. And so like in our home game, I've injected some racism based off of my own experiences, and I haven't done it for a game that we have on stream, but you will find that in our charity games, a lot of the villains are capitalism, because we are all victims of capitalism. And so like if you make your world too cozy and you make your world that is completely devoid of the things that we have to face down, then you're going to look around and go, okay, well, there's no real like conflict here. Like you need to have like a villain. You need to have something in the world that is set against your players.
Yeah.
And not just whatever dragon you summon, but like something thematic.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, like the choice to be like, no, we're not going to just make this like completely devoid of ableism. And obviously it's something you want to like discuss with your players first. Like when we ran Body and Soul, the first thing Q sat down and said was like, hey, heavily racist themes here. How are y'all feeling about this? And everybody was, we're ready to tackle this. That's the point of this. It's fine. But again, they had that discussion first. That was the first thing. And so I'm really like, yeah, there are a lot of aspects of this that I'm really glad that you're including, a lot of angles that you're approaching this with that I really appreciate, because, you know, like like I said, I'm on the outside looking in, and it's something that I want to be better acquainted with.
And let me just real quick just jump in and say, y'all, there are some great, we're gonna dig up those resources and make sure they're included in the VOD description, so people have them, because like if you want to incorporate disabled characters, be them player characters or NPCs, into your games, like that is awesome. Representation matters. Like even the Dimension 20 has a badass barbarian orc in a wheelchair, and she's incredible, right?
Yep.
But also, y'all, read a room.
Yes.
Be aware of what you're doing. Like David and I do not need to be running tables of all disabled players and or characters, right? Like there's a sensitivity that you need to understand. And there's also a difference between there is so much value in learning through things like this. Like in David's game, I play a character who, in David's home game, and again, David is like taking it upon himself to teach our mostly white table about being not white in a world. And so my character is coded as like half black. It's fantasy racism, right? But it's still there. And David, it is not on stream. And David has taken this on and is prepared, and it has been incredible. I do not play that character in streamed games.
Yep.
No, like, and again, it is one thing if you're like, I'm running a game, you have a player with a disability who says, I want to explore this disability. What are the mechanics we can do? And talking through that, right, as a person who does not have that lived experience, and making space for people is important. But also sitting down and David and I going, that's a great idea. Our next campaign is all disabled players and characters, is not the thing to do.
No, and that's like even for running this show that I'm doing, is that like I will say, like, all the characters that are in the first adventure, none of them are blind. I have zero lived-in experience with the disabilities that my characters and players have on a day-to-day basis. So that's kind of where I got to. I was very happy that I did record these. I don't know how I'm going to put these out as of yet, but I did record essentially session 0 with the players as we were building their characters. and it was sort of a way for me to be able to learn more about them and what kind of a disability that they wanted for their characters, and kind of and building that out. So it kind of, and you know, of course, yes, my experience within the accessibility space, that I got to know at least a little bit of how certain disabilities on the surface kind of are, but it's never anything about like, I don't know what the lived-in experience is, and so that's where I'm learning from the players playing their characters, because they're integrating their experiences into it, and I'm just trying to react as honestly and as respectfully as I can, because that is the thing, is that it's the second part, is that I want to make sure that I'm best representing people with disabilities in this game, and part of that is, yeah, allowing the players to highlight and showcase that as part of what their backstory. So I'm still learning, I'm still figuring it out, and I'm probably, you know, like I have a thing on the website that I literally just say is like, hey, we're gonna probably screw up from time to time, but we're gonna, like, the whole thing is that we're learning, we're figuring this out as we go, and that we're hopefully going to be, you know, like make less mistakes as we go along. So that's why I asked, like, hey, you know, forgive us for certain things as we're trying to figure this out, because this is a brand new space for not only just within our own kind of experiences and my own experience, but also within, I think, the TTRPG space in general. That, I mean, I mean, I don't, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think there's any other show that's kind of like this right now. So I want to be able to still highlight and best represent people with disabilities as best as possible. So yeah, I just like we're figuring it out as we go, and yeah, I'm hoping that we do it right, because yeah.
And that session 0 and that conversation with your players is so important, because
Yes.
had you just had folks roll up and you'd be like, okay, well, you're in a wheelchair, here's the combat wheelchair, here's all the stuff that sucks for you, right? Here's the mechanics we're using, full stop, goodbye, right? Like, that is not a good experience. Even if that is exactly the mechanics you end up with at the end, the conversation about what are you looking for, what would be satisfying, what would not be satisfying, what do you want to deal with, what do you not want to deal with? Because there are certainly topics that we touch in our games where I've sat down with the players and been like, is this cool? And I get a thumbs up or a thumbs down. If it's thumbs down, cool, we find something else to talk about. It's totally fine.
Look, there's plenty to mine, and I'm fortunate that I have a lot of conversations with people in the D&D community, in the tabletop community. But I have not experienced the horrors that people have experienced, because like everything that I participate in, I help produce. So like if there's going to be an evil GM or some asshole who's running production who does dumb things, it's going to be me doing it to me. But I've talked to so many people who are in a session 0 and they're like, I'm out of here. Like in either the first 5 minutes or at least by the end, they're like, everything there are no safety tools. This guy is going to be a problem, and the GM isn't going to do anything about it. I don't feel safe here. I said, hey, maybe maybe we're not going to do lynching in this. And then the GM is like, I mean, we have to have lynching. Like, and it's just like, excuse me? What?
Okay.
Right. That is a true story that did not happen to David or I, but happened to a friend of ours.
Right. And so I hear about like all these, and so yeah, like the 0 session is really, because it's not just for you as the person who's running the game, it's also for your players to take the temperature of you.
Yes.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Pete says, I'm proud of you all the same, Steve, anxiously waiting. And Reckless Mage says, great conversation with you all. Thank you. And yes, thank you all for hanging out. We are going to be nearing the end of our time. So if you all have questions in chat, now is the time to throw them out. But I did want to ask, Steven, what was that session 0 like? Like, what were some of the most important conversations and things that you prioritized while putting together a table like this?
So yeah, actually, I have multiple session zeros because I couldn't be able to do a full on like group sort of get together and play. So I had to do them individually with each player. But the way we like it was literally just like let's figure out how to build the character together. And for some instances it was for because they never built a character in D&D before, so I had to kind of like go through that with them. But the first part before we even like went, because we used D&D Beyond to kind of build the characters, but the first thing that we did was, okay, do you want to play with a character with a disability? And I like that was the first sort of decision that they had to make. And they kind of like we're trying to figure it out. And I will say that I was actually kind of very grace or like very happy that they did choose, like each player did choose to be able to play with a character with a disability, because then it was sort of like the fun of, okay, we have this disability. What are some of the mechanics that we can be able to sort of utilize in character creation that we can just sort of be like, okay, we know we're gonna bend some rules here and there, but let's figure out what was sort of the adaptability of this character. And that's sort of like where we figured out with the mage hand as a spell, but then also like what are the mechanics, like the whole thing with chronic fatigue and stuff like that. So it was sort of, as we're kind of like building the backstory of the character, we're also kind of building up the mechanics of the disability in of itself. And it was a great way for players to kind of figure out what they wanted their character to be like. And some ways it was sort of it was very based on their backstory is a little bit based on their what happened to them, and it was very like kind of like sort of in a sense potentially a stereotypical ableist sort of story or backstory, but it like we're able to integrate that as part of the character growth. And so yeah, there was a lot of it was based off of that, and then also was kind of figuring out, okay, what makes you feel the most comfortable at the table? What do you like to be able to do, whether it's is it role playing, is it puzzles, is it combat, but also what are the kind of things that like are that you like and dislike about it, or you're not sure, what are the things basically to make you comfortable accessibly, but also just comfortable at the table. And then yeah, it was just sort of kind of like figuring that out as I go, and it was sort of an easy way for them to just feel comfortable with being able to jump in and play. And so I will say that pretty much I was able to kind of knowing the players and knowing this who they were, and I was able to kind of cater the story around them. And yeah, there was, like I said, there was definitely some ableist moments in the story, but it was very much like I did talk to them, and hey, were we cool? Is this how we feeling? And like that's what kind of allowed us within that hour, like after each hour breaks, of just like, hey, we're checking in, how we feeling, how we doing, and I was totally like, and here's the thing too, as you guys said, like there was people that either GMs or just players that you just like, hey, no, this is not cool. I also have another rule with myself. It's like, hey, if I'm very selective about the players I do want to bring to my table. They have to have at least a decent reputation like online, but also as a decent like. I don't want to just sort of bring in necessarily just random people into it, but also as well that if I do bring in somebody that doesn't vibe with the table, or is doing stuff that's like it's a little whatever, I am totally willing to be like, we're scrapping this. I'm starting over. We're not going to do this again. Like, we're not going to have this adventure. I may invite the other players back, and that person may not join in, but I'm totally willing to be like, I'm not, hey. The content of the show is, I'm not tied to a deadline. It is my show. I do make the final say at the end. And if someone's being a dick, they're gone, and I'll start over again if I have to.
Preach. And yeah, I think, and again, we talked earlier about if your world is too sanitized, if there's no evil, right, it sucks. And there are people that I play with, because you have your people. Right? You know your people. And like with my people, I don't even worry. But if I guest on a lot of channels and a lot of shows, and when you're filling out the lines and veils stuff, I'm like, transphobia, homophobia, misogyny, all those things, like I don't mind those being in there. Sure. So long as it is very, very clearly a thing to overcome. I'm not dealing with, no offense to anyone, but you know who I'm talking about, the cis white dude who's like, well, That's what my character would do because my character's racist. I'm not racist. I'm just putting all the real word racist tropes into this character. Well, I'm not misogynistic, but my character is because he's a jerk. And it's like, cool, I don't need to deal with that. That's not a fun fantasy for me. That's my everyday.
That's just that's just basically using the guise of their characters, give them excuse to be a dick.
And so it's like, I have to, and that's a thing that sucks, is when you don't know the table, you can be like, look, I am so happy for there to be racists in this setting, so I can kick their ass. But I don't want anyone in my party to be racist unless it's like within 2 episodes they go, oh, I actually grew up in the middle of nowhere and you're the first non-human I've met and I'm now amending everything and fixing my ways. I don't mind that character arc, but it needs to happen very quickly, not 24 sessions in. So there is a balance to keep in mind between, like you said, there's ableist things. I assume it's because you again, someone asking me to build a world without the patriarchy. I don't know how to live in a world without the patriarchy. I don't know how to interact with that. I can't build it, much less exist in that space, because it's always been a part of my existence. So you have to find that balance and make sure you know where everyone's lines are, because yes, there are people who can deal with a certain amount of fantasy racism, but the minute that fantasy racism crosses certain lines, it's no longer fun, right? It's too real. So
yeah. And that's, I think, like the best part about storytelling is when you have those sort of like restrictions or kind of boundaries, like you can like it gives you much more creativity. Like for instance, for disabilities, like, okay, I understand it's sort of in a semi-medieval time period, but with magic and dragons. So, okay, what can I be able to do to be able to make a story that works within that? Like, so of course, like I said before, there's no curb cuts in villages in this world. There's no braille signs. There's no ramps, essentially. So yeah, okay, that, essentially makes sense. But what is it about, like, okay, if there's no ramps, what can people with wheelchairs do? Because there are going to be people with wheelchairs and with disabilities. So, okay, yeah, like that's why I love, at least about the combat wheelchair, was that, okay, you can either have it where, telepathically the chair just kind of floats up or down, or kind of moves forward, or you can use like a gemstone that basically that an artificer puts on that you tap and basically it moves forward, backwards, like as any other kind of joystick or like motorized wheelchair would. And that makes, like, that can make sense. And like, if you can have magic basically summon a god from another dimension to basically take over the entire world, why is it so hard to be able to think of an idea of a wheelchair that has a gemstone that they can move up and down stairs? Like, that's why I love it, again, about storytelling, is that when you have those boundaries in place, there, like, it ultimately opens up the ultimate creativity, and you can be like, oh, okay, this is kind of like where I can work within, and let me figure out how to color within these lines, and it just makes a much better story.
And so many of the bad faith argument naysayers will be like, well, if you do that, then you can just do blah, 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 blah. And it's like, the people who genuinely want these tools aren't looking to break your game. They're looking to put their lived experience into the game.
Yeah, exactly.
They're trying to have fun in your game.
Yeah. Imagine
that's exactly
that.
it. Yeah. Like, they're not trying to play like characters that are essentially like, that are always like doom and gloom, like everything sucks. They can if they want to, and that's why I'm even open to like characters that they can decide to be heroes or villains. It's up to them. Like, I know the stereotype is, like villain, part of a villain is, the stereotype is to be disabled in some way. Sure, there's that, but I want to give that player that choice to be able to decide to do it. But hey, that's like if they want to still figure out a way to be able to utilize the world around them and make it, like, again, make it more adaptable, then by all means.
And I will admit that when I heard the words combat wheelchair, my first thought was, wait till an artificer gets a hold of that. And then my second thought was, they're gonna put guns on it. Like, just like a little tube where you roll up like a little scroll of fireball, slide it in there and point it at the fuckers. And then
yeah, I love that a lot.
and you're like, hey, there's a thing that where it just goes up and down. Like, you could have the Professor X chair. And that's why this is so important. Because my first thought was put guns on it. Whereas someone who has that lived experience is like, yeah, I can cast fireball into this village, but boy howdy, would it sure be great to not get stuck in the mud. Like, and yeah, and like, and like there, it goes back to conversations that Kay and I have had on this channel, where like there's a big difference between not knowing the ins and outs of someone's experience versus being prejudicial against those people. Because me going, oh man, I want to put guns on that, isn't necessarily like an ableist thing, but it is. I do lack the perspective of like the practicalities and what someone who would want someone who needs a combat wheelchair, what they would want first. And so again, if I went off and made a game, I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna put this disabled person in, I'm gonna give them a combat wheelchair, and the first thing is I put guns on it, then that's a little disingenuous.
Sure, and but I think that's why I never want to like say I'll never say that to any DM or GM or any potential DM or GM that if they want to incorporate like a player with a disability or even just a player with a combat wheelchair in their game, because they don't have that lived-in experience, they can't really sort of relate or how to properly role play or create a story around that. That's where you can rely on that player, that if that is their lived-in experience, like ask them questions like how would this work with you? Like, do you want to have a combat wheelchair with like a fireball cannon that basically you just put in a spell, put all the components in, and basically just, you know, it just shoots out a fireball, the fireball spell every time you want to use it? Or do you want to just have it where it's just easier to get around by just floating up and down, whether it's a telepathic spell that's connected to your chair? I even have one that it didn't come up in the game, so I think I'm okay with talking about, is that, so one of my characters is an ambulatory wheelchair user, which basically means that you can actually get up and walk around without having to be in a wheelchair. It's not the easiest thing to do, so that's why they have a wheelchair, so they can be mobile, but that is something that is possible. So we figured out a way that, okay, if she wants to be able to walk around, like as she tries to be able to, like with get like her, you know, her speed is halved, or after a certain period of time, or after a certain distance, but then also as well, like if like we even had it where she basically has the reduce spell that she can reduce basically the size of the wheelchair to be by half, and then I also gave her, you know, a bag of holding, put it in there you go, you know, like now you don't have to carry around your wheelchair all the time. So it's like, but I would not have been able to figure that out or know how to do that unless I talked to the player and be like, okay, what would work best for you? So I would encourage you that if you want to be able to run a campaign or an adventure that with someone with disability, and they have that disability, ask them questions. What will work best for them? And be okay with being able to try to find mechanics within D&D that you're not trying to find ways to make D&D a disadvantage to the character. You're trying to find ways that they can be able to adapt to the mechanics. So it's like, yes, of course, if you have an amputee, if you try to use your right hand and that's amputated, of course you're gonna have a disadvantage on dexterity checks. But if they're using the left hand, they're totally fine. So it's stuff like that. It's like being able to work around the mechanics that's there, and being open to bending the rules a little bit is something that you can be able to have some really great just role playing and storytelling just from that alone. So yeah, of course, being able to run a campaign with a bunch of disabled players, and if you're not disabled yourself, it can be scary and probably not the best solution, or you may not be the best storyteller for that group of players. But don't be afraid to do that either, if you are open to learning from those players too, and hopefully you can create some great stories together.
You will learn a lot.
Yes.
And those again, we talk so many problems in TTRPG could just be solved by just communication. So talk, communicate, over communicate. I literally, a thing came up in a game and I was like, I did not expect my character to even consider this, but now that we know it's an option, GM, they might ask this NPC about another world version of themselves. And I just want you to be aware, and We can workshop it. You can have an answer for me. You can have the characters say they're not going to. I just don't want you to be blindsided in the moment
Yep.
because this is a big thing. And that's what's so important. Then that's just a silly character backstory. We're talking about someone's lived in experience that is deeply different.
Mhm.
And if you are uncomfortable having those conversations, then you are not in the space to be able to run those kinds of games for those
Yeah.
people.
For sure.
Yes. Chat, David, any final questions before
I want to give you an opportunity to talk about your players. Tell us about your players.
Yeah.
I mentioned we have Just See 'em, and we have Hello It's Colo, Mike the Quad, Morgan Baker, and Grant Stoner. They are amazing folks, especially CM is a Twitch ambassador and works within the TTRPG space. You can be able to check her out on Forgotten Realms, I think is forgot the thing here. Forgotten Pass is her show, and she also works with the Wounded Warriors Project. She's got a TTRPG with them. Hello, it's Colo has been in a few RPG games, but this is kind of her first time jumping into D&D. But she's a streamer from the UK. She's great. And then Mike the Quad is someone I kind of met brand new. Like I've not met this person before, and except for this show. And he's a great streamer. Loves being able to play first-person shooters, and he's a quadriplegic, so he's great to be able to watch. And then, like I said, Morgan Baker, accessibility lead at EA, and she's an amazing person. She goes by Momo X Mia on Twitter. And then Grant Stoner, who is an accessibility journalist in the video game space, has a column over at IGN called Access Designed, and also has written for Wired, for Kotaku, and bunch of different other places, and he's actually award-winning accessibility journalist because he has won a few awards for his work, and he's super_crip 1994 on Twitter as well. So yeah, they're great players. I can't wait for people to be able to hear what their stories are and what their characters are, because it's a fun time. I'm looking forward to more people seeing what they got.
I want to ask, and I recognize this might not be a fair question because you might not be able to answer it without spoiling. But did you have a moment that surprised and delighted you? Did you have a moment where you were like, "This is it. This is."
Yes, for sure. There was, and it was not even necessarily like story changing, but it was just how, I'll say LTs. It was sort of just how the players interacted with each other. Like their sort of first sort of like getting to know each other was some of like the best, like the most surprising, the best moments in the whole adventure. Because I mean, yeah, I'm a fan of RP. I love RP. That's kind of like my personal style of whenever I'm a player. But yeah, I was seeing them kind of interact was great, and there definitely are some pretty fun surprises in there too that I just did not expect. Yeah, I'm looking like, without spoiling it, there's some fun moments.
I recognize it's not fair, but you have to. But it's good to know. So it's that first episode where that's your.
Actually, well, it's not specifically the first episode. It's the first Yeah, I don't want to spoil it too much, but yeah, the first episode is very much a let's know their backstory kind of deal.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, awesome. So obviously we're going to have links. We've got links in the chat. We're going to have links in the VOD. But tell us, how do we find it? Where do we find it? When's the best time to watch to support? How do we support, etc.?
Sure, yeah. So you can be able to, everything is going to be at the website, dungeonsanddisableds.com, or you can be able to search any podcast platform or on YouTube for Dungeons and Disableds. It is a podcast that will go up, at least the first adventure will go up every week, every Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern. And it'll go up on YouTube and on podcast platforms, but you can also tune in to watch it live on my Twitch channel, twitch.tv/Steve Saylor, where I'll be doing a pre-show starting at 6:30 p.m. Eastern every Wednesday. Then the episode will premiere at 7, and then afterwards we'll have a little bit of like an after show where I and hopefully some of the players will be able to join in and answer questions and talk about the episode that just aired. So you can be able to go check that out. But everything, all subscription for links and all that stuff is over at including a store. We actually do have merch if you want to be able to buy some with a cool logo of the show. You can be able to go to everything at dungeonsanddisableds.com.
Amazing. And with that, I think we are bringing this to a close. Steve, thank you so much for joining us. I cannot wait to dive in. I cannot wait to see this group. I feel like, especially for a group that didn't really get a communal session 0, a jailbreak is the perfect way to do that, because it's like, it doesn't actually matter your backstories. You're all here. What you gonna do?
Exactly. That's I was like, okay, that's a cool sort of like siloed adventure that they can like, hey, like we there's some fun stuff. Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that, and thank you so much for having me on the show. This was a great conversation. I love being able to dig into the weeds of all this stuff. So
Yes.
This is great. And I apologize for rambling. I talked way too much.
Nope, that's what you're here for.
Neither of
That's
us
what
have
you're here
ever rambled in
Yeah,
our time.
I've never ranted, not once.
Cool.
So yes, thank you, chat, for joining us. Thank you so much to Mimics and Misfits, DM Jazzy Hands, and Urban Bohemian for the raids. That was so kind of you. Thank you for bringing your communities over. We hope you will check out Dungeons and Disabled. You can find us here every Tuesday doing this. Sometimes us just talking about what's going on in the TTRPG space, and sometimes with incredible guests like Steve Saylor, talking about their projects, the things they're creating, Kickstarters, and other cool stuff happening in the space. I'm Kay. I've been one of your co-hosts. That's David. At least I hope you're still David.
Yep.
And
For now, at least.
I think this feels correct. We should go raid the Wounded Warrior Project, who's doing a
Yeah.
Just Chatting right
Good
now.
call.
We will head over that way. Thank you all so much for hanging out. You can always come by Thursday and Friday at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific for our Baldur's Gate 3 first playthrough. We are in Act 2. And we will have more stuff coming out soon, but, not yet. And be sure to remember, crit awards are open. Nominate your favorite performer, AP, or system creator. It means a whole lot to people. So thank you all. You are awesome. Remember, be kind to yourself and be excellent to others. And we will see you all next time.